rivers of Babylon, as we sat down, and there we were, as we remember Zion. Well, I've been thinking a little bit about the world situation, the Palestinian situation, the Russian situation, the Haitian situation. A lot of people probably don't know that there's another war going on in Haiti, and the Americans have just sent troops in there. So there you go, there's 3 wars on the planet: East, West, and in the middle. And it's interesting, it's led me to think about the end of empires, and in my last video, and suicide, because in my last video I talked a little bit about suicide, and after talking about suicide, in that same evening I thought, I feel like watching a video, and so I put on a James Bond. I found a James Bond video which prepped me up for it a little bit. Never Say Die, I think it was. And so having warmed up to Never Say Die, I then opened my computer and I thought, let me find a video out of all my collection of videos I have. Let me find one. So I scrolled through all the videos, and the one that took my eye was The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Now I was surprised that I chose this video because I watched it fairly recently. It's not sort of a film that I have, it's a long time since I watched. And so it wasn't just for entertainment I was watching, there was some other reason that I had to watch this Taking Pelham 1, 2, 3 again. Okay, so anyway, I put the thing on, and immediately, as soon as I put it on, I thought, wow, what a tremendously higher level movie this is than the James Bond one was alright, but this was really something. This was acting, this was style, this was filmmaking. This thing had something to say, I felt. So I watched the whole thing again. Every time I watch this film, I've seen The Taking Pelham 1 to 3, I think maybe about 3 times. This might have been probably the 3rd or 4th time that I watched this thing. And every time I watch it, I don't tire of it. There's sufficient in it to think about, to actually, it's engaging all the way through. It's engaging, and there's a lot to be learned perhaps from this film, but many things in the world. Okay, and as I watched this film, so I watched, and the main character in the film is a stockbroker, a Wall Street man, who steals a lot of money and ends up in prison, and is corrupted by the prison system, and he's also sexually corrupted as well, and so he's having sex with male inmates and things like this, and he's talking in this like strange way. He's perverted, he's perverted. He wants to do things to people to degrade them, just for his own, does something for him, Okay, so he's lost the plot, He's turned away from goodness and he's gone to this other side, And he feels himself justified in this because his brain tells him that he's right, He doesn't care about these other people. He's just right, okay. In his own mind, his own mind. And at the end of the video, he dies. Now, because I've been talking about suicide, I watched his death and the thought came to me. I said, this guy, this is another way of committing suicide. You don't take your own life. you force somebody else to take your life. Okay, I hadn't thought about this before, how you can create suicide by getting somebody else to kill you. And so in this case, he got to the end of the line, there was guns pointing at him, and he had the choice. He thought he had the choice, because we don't really have a choice, yeah. When our life comes to an end, that's the end of it. You know, nature has no further use for us. This is the best use that nature can make of our body in this moment. So if he'd have carried on and gone to prison, he wouldn't have been able to serve nature in any better way than for him to go out in a blaze of gunshots and not end up to become some kind of a legend in his own right, if you like, a dark legend like the Dark Knight Batman, you know. And so, Taking a Pelham 1 to 3, it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, well, check it out. Yeah, it's well worth a watch. A few watches, actually. Yeah, a few watches. I got the Blu-ray edition, and wow, the quality of it's good. The sound's good. Yeah, the picture's good. Not all Blu-rays are. This particular one is. Okay, so to get back to our subject, so I thought, you know, just like people can commit suicide by getting themselves shot by the enemy, so whole nations can commit suicide, yeah. And so I thought about all the wars and the end of empires and things like this. And I thought of what happened to these empires. Now, let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to Egypt. This is why I'm playing this song here, By the Rivers of Babylon, yeah. Okay, because the Jews were slaves in Egypt, yeah. They just had to do what their Egyptian masters, which were the upper classes, what the upper classes told them to do. They just had to do. You didn't want to drag these big blocks of stone up and build pyramids with them. They didn't want to do that. But they were forced to do what they didn't feel like doing, just like if somebody had to go to work to Amazon because the job centre said, if you don't go and work at Amazon, you won't eat. You know, it's just like the Egyptians, the situation of the Egyptians at that time. But anyway, the good old Moses, the prophet, came along and he said to the Egyptians, he said, you have to set my people free. You have to set them free. You have to, we want our leader in charge. We want our leader in charge. And the Egyptians just wouldn't do it. And all sorts of bad things happened after that, okay? And so they were committing suicide, really, as a nation, the Egyptians. They were committing suicide because they were going up against nature herself in the form of Moses. Okay, Moses was the representative of nature. This is not just. And if justice doesn't reign, the whole world is justice. If justice doesn't reign, in the end, the unjust have to somehow be dealt with. Okay, and what nature does is it sends a higher power against them. This can be a higher spiritual power, the power of nature. It can be another powerful nation, okay, a warlike nation, the same as them. So anyway, what happened to the Egyptians was they had lots of bad stuff happen to them. They died of diseases, and the locusts ate all through. They starved to death. Yeah, all of their business empire was destroyed. It went into economic chaos and ruin. And in the end, they chased the Jews across the Red Sea. The Jews were in exodus. You know, they had to move. Yeah, they had to get away. And the Red Sea destroyed the Egyptians in the end. Okay, so this is a story. Okay, this is a story. But it's a legend. In fact, behind every legend, there's a certain element of truth. And it's true that the Egyptians became corrupted. Yeah, you can't use slaves to do silly big building jobs. You know, you can't build the New York skyscrapers, just as bad as building the the pyramids. Yeah, you can't force people to do this. In the end, nature gets you. Yeah, nature gets you. Because Moses had another interesting commandment. Yeah, Moses said, he said, God told me to tell you guys this: thou shalt not kill. Okay, now it doesn't say thou shalt not kill each other. It just says thou shalt not kill, full stop. You know, the Tibetans and the Indians and that, they used to know this, not the North American Indians, the other Indians. They used to know this, the Hindus. And they wouldn't kill animals and eat them. Yeah, they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't kill any living creature, some of them. And I go so far as to say that you shouldn't kill a mosquito. You shouldn't kill anything alive. You shouldn't kill the bacteria on your own body. That's what I say. Now, not many people will be able to live up to that, but in the end, to go on the highest journey of life, you have to prove that you can live amongst the mosquitoes and not kill them, and live happily together with them, and all the other elements of nature, the bees, the wasps, the hornet. You have to make friends with the hornet, you know. You can't kill these things. And there's a purpose and function for everything in nature, and we cannot kill and destroy nature. And so, when we build a skyscraper, that's the end of nature. Yeah, there's no nature anywhere there. Yeah, we dig a big hole in the ground. Yeah, that's the end of it. That piece of space is gone forever. And whatever we do in nature, we should do to improve nature. You know, we should take some bad place in nature and rebuild it. And that's what they said after the war. They said, you will turn your spears into pruning hooks or something like that. I don't know what the saying is. But it's time to clean up the house then, yeah? To get stuck in, rebuild the spoiled place of nature. Okay. So, the Egyptians became corrupted. The Greeks became corrupted. They also became homosexual in the end. Yeah? And the Greek says this is well documented because the Greeks wrote about themselves. They're one of the few empires that had much to say about themselves, and they put it all in writing, so we know what happened to the Greeks. They became corrupted, the men became effeminate. We don't know about the women, but they probably became masculine. And everything got to be its opposite, and they became perverted, and they ended up in the Trojan War. You know, the Trojan War was the start of the end for the Trojans. It was the end of the Trojan Empire. Okay, the Trojans, and then the Greeks. Well, they passed on a little bit later. After that, became the Romans took over. You know, the Romans. The Romans, not a very well-known fact that the Romans also became perverted and effeminate and masculine and all the rest of it. And because their last outpost was Constantinople, right? So they ended up in Constantinople, and they were weakened. They couldn't defend themselves anymore. They would just become perverted. And so they shouted out for their brothers and sisters in the West, you know, the old Roman Empire, to come and help them. And they sent crusades, and crusades failed to try to pass through the lands north of them, what became the Ottoman Empire. And, you know, they had trouble there. And in the end, all these people, all of these in this Ottoman area, although the name for them, these Orthodox Christians, Roman Empire, the Armenians and those people, they were all part of it. They were like their colonies, you know. Bad stuff happened to them. Yeah, they were all wiped out in the end and became wanderers in the world without land. Yeah, the Armenians, the prey. And a genocide eventually happened to them. Yeah? Same as what happened to the Jews, I suppose. Same. It's interesting how there are parallels to these things all the way through. Okay, so that was the Romans, yeah, the Romans. Now, if you come closer to our own time now, we can see the end of the British Empire, okay? Now, also at the end, they tend to fight wars. What happens is they fight unjustly, they fight wars unjustly. Now, sending people to fight in an unjust war, this is really a suicide, kind of suicide of the nation. You know, this wipes out many, many people. And look at the First World War. The First World War was a terrible war. And people were sent to fight in the First World War. And at the end of that war, there were revolutions in many countries. And Russia had its revolution. And the British also rebelled against the empire, the British Empire, the rulers of the empire. The British working classes also rebelled, but they refused to fight. They wanted them to carry on and fight against communist Russia, but they refused to do it. And so the powers that be pulled them back and finished the war at that point in time. Okay, but you know, it's unjust. It's not justice, and you know they made agreements, unjust peace agreements, and so on. So it all just had to happen all over again. And so the Russian nation at that point pretty much committed suicide in that war, and a new nation was born out of it, out of a remnant that's kept. There's always a remnant that's kept, that survives and creates the new nation. Okay, so you'll see that that remnant that was made, the new nation of Russia, that is the nation of Russia as it is now. It's the fruit of that remnant after World War I. Okay. Now, if we look at the Germans fought a much fairer war than the British. The British fought a kind of unfair, advantaged war, and it was all of us lot against you, the Germans. It was, you know, it's like you put a gang in a ring against one person with his arm tied behind his back, and he's got to kind of like try and fight his way out of this. And you know, what you do if you're overwhelmed by superior weapons or superior odds or this kind of thing, then you don't run away. You can't run away. If you turn and run, you get shot in the back. That's the end of you, because you have to show courage in life. You can't do that. And so what you do is you just take your weapon and you lay it down at your feet and you put your hands up. That's it. It says, I can't fight you, you're cheating. Okay, now you don't say that, but that's what you're saying to them. Yeah. And so if you do that, nothing but good will happen to you, and you'll see. And that's the opposite of committing suicide. Okay, then you become part of the new nation that's forming. If you fight to the death, well, that's the end of you. You know, you don't form part of that new nation that's forming. So many, many people get eliminated. The ones who are not good enough to form part. If nature says, I can't use you in my new nation, you know, you won't learn your lessons. So you're out of here. Okay, all those people, they get given many, many chances, but then they're out of here. They're dead. Okay, the ones that put their weapons down, or the ones that didn't go to fight in the war in the first place, they remain, and they use to form the parts of the new nation that nature makes. So nature creates a new nation. And you'll see after World War II, the powers that be, Winston Churchill was out of power, and a new government formed and a new nation formed around a new government in England, in Great Britain, and there was a new start. And my parents were part of that first start. I know that it was a time of renewal, and people, instead of doing nothing and complaining about their government and all that, there was freedom. People were kind of free to create. Yeah, there weren't all the rules and regulations yet, and so the new which had been removed by the war, yeah, and so people were more free to create, and they had interesting lives, my parents, after the war, because they were a remnant. They had been judged fit enough to make the new nation. Now, the same thing happened in Germany. Now, the difference between Germany and the UK after the war was the UK seriously cheated at war. I'm afraid it seriously cheated. And so that has to be repaid. And so the state of Britain now, and let's say 20 years ago, was not that great if you compared it to the state of Germany, which became the powerhouse, economic powerhouse of Europe, yeah, Germany, and everything was rebuilt and everything became, because the Germans fought a more fair war than the opposing powers, who ganged up, if you like, on Germany and broke the codes and did all sorts of trickery to kind of defeat the Germans, not in a fair fight. You know, instead of just fighting a fair fight. Now, in actual fact, the British were defeated. The Allies, in fact, were defeated in World War II, and they actually had to run away back across the Channel, back to England, okay? And so that was the defeat of the British, and at that point the Americans stepped in, and so it became World War III, really. And at that point that the British were defeated, that was the end of the British Empire. The British Empire was finished at that point in time. That was the end of it. They had committed suicide on the battlefield and had been destroyed by the superior German forces. Okay, so now we see the birth, following that over time, the birth of a new England and new Scotland, and the new colonies, but the birth then also of the American Empire. Okay, so the American Empire basically stepped in to the ring as the British Empire stepped out. Okay, so that was the birth of the empire. Before that they were a nation, now they become an empire. Okay, so the American Empire is really America and Israel, okay, because half of the Jews are in Hollywood and New York and the other half are in Israel, okay, and so they're all kind of part of the one empire, yeah. And then all the nations that became subservient to the American Empire are just like its colonies, really. And so, you know, that's Canada, the UK, and all of the Commonwealth nations. India kind of sits together with it, but, you know, is umming and ahhing about what its position in the world is going to be. So we can see now that this empire that was born at this time, at the end of, or the beginning of World War III, which was said to be part of World War II, but really wasn't, it was really World War III. World War III ended, or the first phase of it ended, with the atom bomb at Hiroshima. And you can see this was a product of American and Jewish activity, because a lot of the scientists which were involved in development of the nuclear bomb were the Jewish people, okay? And so you can't do this stuff. Everything that you do in the world creates karma. And so you carry that karma not only for yourself, but also for your nation as well. So there's national karma as well as personal karma. And it's necessary, all we have to do is look after our own personal karma, but we're stuck in the karma of our nation. So we have to go through whatever happens to our nation. If it commits suicide, like the Americans are committing suicide at the moment, yeah, and the remnant is coming out of America to form a new American nation, which is not an empire anymore. The empire's finished. Yeah, the globalists, they just have to somehow disintegrate like the Roman Empire disintegrated. It's the same sort of thing. And basically, the wars are what, the attrition of war is what eliminates the bad elements of society. And so the ones that won't change, the ones that keep going to work at Amazon, you know, all those people, they all end up going to fight in the last battle in the Armageddons of the world. Okay, and so we can watch that happen now. The main thing is we don't get involved. Anybody who wants to be part of the future of humanity, who wants to be selected by nature, has got to do what nature wants us to do. If nature wants you to go and fight in the war and get killed, you need to do it. You won't be able to help yourself. You'll feel like doing it. You'll feel like going. If nature wants to preserve you, you won't feel like going. You'll simply say, no, I'm not going to go and fight in your silly war. You lot, you go and fight it. Do what you like with me. And as long as you don't obey them, you know, as long as you're just your own man and you just say, I won't kill, I will not kill anybody, anything. Not even a bacteria in my body. Don't come try to inject me with anything. Your poisons. You understand? It's necessary to, we'll all be personally tested in this respect. And we have been personally tested. The COVID thing was a personal test of all of you. You have practice run on that. Now comes the main run. And the main run is coming now. I think it's enough. I think I've said what nature wants me to say. By the rivers of Babylon, as we sat down, and there we wept, as we remember